Hello, I'm author Bob Pierce, and welcome back to the studio. This is part 2 of our Faces videos, talking about finding faces for your front cover. We've talked in earlier videos about the power of and the psychology of what you choose to put on your front cover, and faces being the most powerful thing you can use, particularly if they make eye contact with the potential buyer of your book. Now, in part 1, we talked about different sources for getting faces, some of them free, some of them inexpensive, and some of them very expensive, all of which, however, legal. And still, 2 caveats in any of that, whether you get them from a public domain site or from a royalty-free site, you probably don't have exclusive rights to the images, especially if it's something like the National Archives. That means somebody else can use those images for another book or another project, or maybe even just some sort of promotional thing, but you're not the sole owner of that image, no matter how much you paid for it. Now, some of the download sites will allow you to pay extra for exclusivity, in which case they'll take the image out of their catalog online so nobody else can buy it after you do, although that doesn't preclude anyone having bought it before you, though, either. But at the same time, too, you don't have unlimited rights unless you pay extra for that as well. You can use it for the cover of your book, one time, the first edition, if you will, but you can't use it anywhere else. You can't use it in promotional materials or anything else that you intend to put that image on. So you can pay extra for that and end up reaching pretty deep into your pockets by the time you get that one image and able to use it the way you want to use it. The solution to all of this is to shoot your own, to do a live model shoot, and it sounds pretty daunting. It's got its challenges, to be sure, but well worth it. And actually, I find it a lot of fun whenever we've done this sort of thing, put a team together and gone out and done a shoot either in a studio or on a location. So we'll talk about how all of that comes together in this video right now. Now, you know your book, you know the story, you know your characters. You should know them pretty intimately. We've talked about that in other videos. So you need to plan what your cover image wants to be, what it's going to convey. You need that to be in the back of your mind through this whole process. Whatever it is you do to get an image, you want to have a plan of attack, so to speak, especially when you're going to be working with live models. Remember again that this image is to reinforce the story, not tell the story. So you want something that gives the flavor of the story, gives people some kind of a feel for what to expect in the book, but not really identify anything or any character on the cover. You want to do your sketches, and they don't have to be particularly good sketches, just kind of show the position that you want the model to pose in. And it can be stick figures if that's all you're able to do, that's fine. You just need something to be able to visually impart to your photographer as well as to the model what it is you're looking for. And then prepare a shot list. Shot list is basically a list, really, a written down list of the different locations, the different poses, the different shots that you want the photographer to take. And then share all of that with the photographer and the model. And you'll find out that they might have a few ideas as well. And we'll take a look at that in just a bit here too. So number 1, you need to secure a photographer, preferably a pro or at least a hobbyist that is kind of on the borderline of being a pro. Next, you'll need to get a hairdresser. I would suggest that this is an imperative. One of the things that you need to keep in mind, and I'll harp on this throughout this whole video, is that you need to keep stroking the ego of your models. not that they're egotistic maniacs like some professionals can be. Mostly you're going to be dealing with people you've found in the world in one sort or other. Just that it's a very self-conscious kind of endeavor. You're hiring someone for their looks. They don't get lines like they would in a movie or anything like that. They have to look good, and they have to feel like they look good, and they have to feel comfortable. They have to feel valued. So having someone taking care of them, fussing over them, doing their hair and doing their makeup is a big help. I've used the hairdresser that cuts what's left of this. And she has been more than happy to come out and do a few of the shoots that we've done. And I've also, on the Lilith shoot, used a woman who is a Mary Kay representative who came out and did a fabulous job for us and made the model feel beautiful. Not that she needed any help, but it's having someone else fawn over you like that is a great encourager in these sort of situations. And I do bump into her from time to time in various places. Not that I buy Mary Kay or anything, but at craft shows and various local events and things, I see her set up with her tent. And I always get a huge hug from her. I really like her a lot. And anyway, for each and all of these people, you want to make sure you pay them for their work. A workman is worthy of his wages, and give them some samples, especially the photographer, but the other folks as well. And I know my hairdresser liked to display blow-ups of the book covers on the wall of her studio, and her little. They all have little cubicles where they each worked, and so they're all decorated with various things. And she'd had a couple of those images up there just to show people, hey, I did the hair for this particular project. And you want to make sure too that they get samples of some of the collateral stuff too, some of the things that you do to promote the book as well. And lunch. Always nice if you do the shoot in the morning to treat everybody to lunch, even if things go late, maybe a late lunch or whatever. And your team will be a team if you treat them like one. And that's really important. It really is. Now, your photographer, being a pro, probably has his own scale of expenses and what they charge for their work. You're kind of doing them a favor by hiring them, but they're really doing you a favor by shooting this whole thing. So if you can negotiate a price, yeah, great. Otherwise, it's worth it to pay them what they ask. As far as the other folks are concerned, like the model, pay them a small fee and give them all the samples, and usually and lunch, of course. Don't forget lunch. Usually that is more than enough to make everybody really happy. This doesn't have to be a really expensive endeavor for you, but if you plan it right and do it right and get the right people involved, it'll really be worth it. Now, actually finding a model isn't all that difficult. I have never used a professional modeling agency to hire a model. First of all, they're too expensive. Second of all, up here in the Vermont North Country, actually, I don't even know if there are any up here. So there's the travel that's involved as well. But no, I've approached people out of the blue. I've hired bank tellers. A saleswoman who came into my store in Littleton once. Had a project coming up. I needed a model. She walked in, right place, right time, and she was willing to do it. A client's young niece, when we needed a young tween age girl to pose with money. Which might have been the motivating factor, I don't know. And some of my own employees have gotten the nod as well. And for a couple of them, I've advertised in the paper and gotten some responses. In this particular case, Michelle here on the left was my employee at Cavallino Graphic, and this girl on the end here, Rihanna, she responded to an ad for a previous project, and when we went to do this project for a client that sells these little sharpening gizmos, I just called her up and said, well, it's a different enough client that it's okay to have the same face, plus a very different wardrobe. And in the previous one, she had gold paint on her face, so the recognition issue really wasn't there. So great, let's hire her again. And the first one was kind of a local advertising campaign. This was national, so it was okay to use the same model twice. And the guy in the middle, he really is a chef. He owns a restaurant in Littleton, and when we were talking about this new model of machine that the company was coming out with, we wanted to get a chef to pose. And I figured David would be willing to pose, but getting a place to do the shoot was going to be a challenge. Now, we used somebody's kitchen in kind of an upscale home to do these other images, and that picture you saw of George, he shot these, by the way, that was in that kitchen from another angle. But David, he said, well, why don't you shoot it in my kitchen? Just come on down to the restaurant, bring your little machine and stuff. I've got plenty of knives, and I'll clean up the counter, make sure there's no clutter or anything, and we'll do the shoot right there, which is what we ended up doing. And David ended up in Gourmet Magazine for an ad campaign for these sharpening machines. Now, for the cover of the book Ascension, we hired a model from, actually, she's a car dealer. My wife and I were buying a car at a car dealership, and we were sitting in front of the salesperson's desk, a couple of desks down from hers, interminably waiting for papers to come back and the salesman to go talk to his manager and, well, whatever all else. It's all kind of a blur, to be honest. And the car ended up being a lemon, but nevertheless, I happened to see her sitting at her desk a couple of doors down, so I went over and talked to her, and ended up, telling her, hey, look, you look the part for the cover of the next book I'm working on. Would you be willing to pose for the cover? She didn't think very long or hard about it, and although I didn't have business cards with me at the time, which would have helped for the credibility factor, but she was game, and we conversed back and forth on email for a little bit, and ultimately we did the shoot in the photographer's studio for the cover and other collateral material. For Lilith, a little different approach. First time I'd ever done it, but I posted something on Facebook. I said I'm looking for a model for the cover of my next book, and described what this model wanted to be, roughly how old they want to be, a few other factors about them, kind of athletic looking, long hair, a few other factors. Vague enough that if you were any of the above, you'd probably work out just fine. She is a photographer, actually somebody I knew at the time, and she and her husband lived down about 2 hours away from where we did the shoot up in St. Albans, and she wanted to see what it was like to be on the other side of the lens. So she figured she'd come out, be the model. She fit the description that we were looking for, and find out what it's like to be the model as opposed to the photographer, and get some tips from observing the photographer that's doing the shoot, and how he actually operates and works with the models and so forth. And I think that really added a lot to the success of that shoot, and it ended up with the front cover image, the back cover image, a lot of the illustration images inside. And because she's mentioned in a previous book that hadn't gone to press yet, I included one of those pictures as an illustration in that book as well. No explanation, just there she is. She's got the rifle under her arm and everything, so it's pretty obvious what she's up to. And so after that, this book comes out and you can put the pieces together. And that was probably the best photo shoot we've ever done. Now, when you approach a model out in the world somewhere, you need to come off being very professional. You know, there are a lot of people out there who have weird little agendas, and you know, a smart person, not just a young woman, but a smart person would be leery of such an offer. So you want to make sure that they feel comfortable with what you're saying. Have business cards handy so you can walk up and say, here's my card, here's my contact information. You have a website that's on there too. They can go to the website and they can see some of your other work. If you have other books, they'll be on the website. They could see that you're legitimate. You're an author. You're a writer, and you're self-published. So you're looking to hire somebody local to do the posing for their book or for your book. Be polite. Be complimentary without being goopy. I think I said that before. Be general with your compliments. Don't compliment any particular part of their physical anatomy, unless you want to be specific about the face and say you have a pretty face, or you look the part of the character that I want to portray. That kind of thing. People like to be told they look nice, especially women. Guys, a couple of sideways compliments usually are enough, because that's really all they want to hear. Don't get weird with me, but okay, just walk on thin ice when you do this, because until you win their trust, they are going to be suspicious, and you don't want to risk ruining the whole thing because you kind of went overboard. During the shoot itself, it's important to keep that up as well. Be complimentary, be encouraging, tell them they're doing a great job, say that you're a great model, you're very flexible, very malleable, we really like working with you, etc., etc., etc. Just be very positive through the whole thing. And then at lunch, afterwards, if you do lunch, it gets to be very casual and very matter-of-fact kind of stuff, while you're laughing and talking about the whole thing and kind of reviewing all of this. Do throw a few more compliments out as well. Don't make them sound contrived. Don't sound like you're kind of working at this. It should come off as being pretty natural. For the book Hunting Lilith, we did a remote shoot and started out, as I recommend that you do as well, with a plan. And these are some of the sketches that I worked up, crude though they are, intended for sharing with the photographer and the model, and creating as well a shot list so that the photographer knows what all I'm looking for at the end of this whole shoot. With the sketches done, I went around the town with my little digital camera and snapped a few angles of the locations that I was hoping to shoot from. These I would share with both the photographer and with the model, so they had an idea of where we would be going and what we would be doing in each case. And it also helped familiarize myself as well. I knew all of these places because I was pretty familiar with the town to begin with, but the nuances and angles of these different places, so that when we got there, we could just kind of jump right into it. We also needed to discuss with the model her wardrobe. There are no really private places in these public areas that we were shooting in for her to be able to do a wardrobe change. So we had to strategize that, and essentially she used the same wardrobe, putting a jacket on, taking the jacket off, changing a few outer garments and a hat and whatnot, and that gave us enough variety without having to find some private place to change. We didn't need permissions for any of these places, but because they were public places and we knew what we were going to be doing, posing with the particular props we had in mind, a couple of weeks in advance, once we knew the date, did give an email to the police chief to let him know we were coming and where we would be and what we would be doing. Now, these are a couple of the shots that we got from the Lilith shoot. These two were on my shot list and ended up being used for the one on the left for the book. That picture is on the title spread on the inside of the book. And the one on the right we used for all kinds of promotional materials. From that position and that particular location, the photographer used a lot of his own creative effort, having her pose in different ways, and a different angle of this same image ended up being used on the cover. That's important to give your photographer some creative freedom. Remember, they are artists of a sort themselves, and they have a professional impression of what they're doing. Get your shots shot, but give your photographer and your model too, and even, I mean, we've listened to the people who are on the crew as well, the makeup artist and the hairdresser, with their ideas, and we ended up with a lot of extra photos that could be used as illustrations inside the book or for some sort of promotional edge. Now, when you're on site, whether remote or in the studio, remember, you are the boss, you're the director, you're paying for all of this, and it's your project and your vision that these images are intended for. So don't be afraid to spend a little extra effort talking to the model. Be professional. Be aware that in these situations, there's a lot of self-esteem and a lot of self-respect involved. The model needs to feel comfortable and needs to feel like she's attractive and wanted for this project. And so be encouraging, don't be goopy and weird, but do give nice general compliments like, you're doing a great job, this is terrific, but don't be afraid to go in there and turn her shoulders one way or another, brush the hair back from her head, tilt her head back, physically touch her and move her around. That's part of the job of a model, so she needs to be familiar with that from the outset and understand that. We're talking about dealing with amateurs here. A pro you wouldn't really have to worry about, but amateurs, they're flattered that you've asked them to do this, and you want them to come away from this experience feeling good about what they did. Now, during the Lilith shoot, that picture that you saw in front of those oak doors, that was one of our last locations, and a couple of doors down from that location was this old brick church building, very gothic and almost creepy looking. The photographer and the model kind of conspired together and asked, is it okay if we take a walk for a few minutes and go do some of our own ideas? And so this is what came of it. They shot these pictures in and around that church, and the one on the left nearly ended up as the front cover image for the book. It wasn't quite what I had in mind, but it ended up being used for a lot of promotional materials later on. We're still promoting the book. The picture on the right will probably be used for something else at some point. Bottom line, give your photographer, give your model, give your crew creative freedom, and you never know. I mean, you could end up with a lot of extra pictures that could be very useful in the future that you probably never even thought of. Just a side note to remember when you're doing this, be sure that you get your model and your photographer both to sign releases. Photographers oftentimes hold the copyright to their work and the images that they shoot. You want all of those on a CD or a thumb drive or somehow given to you for your use and exclusive rights. You want to make sure that you have full rights in perpetuity. That's important. No one-time use deals or anything like that. Likewise with the model, you want to make sure she signs a release saying that you are the owner of the images in exchange for whatever compensation you've given them. That's why it's important to pay at least a little bit to the model, even if she says, oh no, I would do it for free. Well, no, there has to be some sort of money exchanged. Doesn't have to be a lot, but it has to be something to make it a legal deal. Have her sign the release, preferably before you do the shoot, so that there's no questions afterwards. You don't go through all this effort for nothing. And you could find standard images, standard documents online, a boilerplate Word document or something like that that you can download and just put in your own name and things like that and edit it, and then print it out and have the model sign it and the photographer sign his. You'll find photographer model releases, but you're also looking for artists releases for the photographer and for any artist that you might hire to do art for illustrations and covers for your books. And when you're shooting on location, you have a crew. There's the director, you have a photographer, the model of course, and you have the crew of makeup and hair and anybody else there that might be there. And so sometimes you end up with challenges that might take the team to solve. Here's one case during the Lilith shoot. We went to the location that I snapped in the picture on the left months before we went to do the photos, and that wall down the side there is what I was hoping to get in the picture, with the model walking toward the camera down the sidewalk, skulking away from her latest assassination or whatever. And on the right, that's what we found when we got there. In the meantime, the town or whomever tore up the sidewalk, ripped up the sewer line in the street, and just made an impossible mess of the whole thing. I was ready to scrap the whole idea. I thought it looked too dangerous. And I just basically said, all right, let's move on to the next location. It was just a couple blocks down the street. But the photographer and the model talked about it and decided to go for it. After trying a few things that I thought would be safer, eventually the photographer, that's him crouched down in a doorway on the left, decided to ask the model to walk on these rocks and gravel. With the heels that she was wearing on those boots, I thought for sure we were courting disaster. But she was willing, and she's a photographer herself, so she knew the value of getting the shot just right. And ultimately, it paid off. The work in Photoshop involves silhouetting her, the wall, and all that rock and gravel and cones and all the rest of that mess out from the photograph and placing it on more of an urban background scene, something thrown out of focus to make it look like it's in the distance. And that ended up becoming our back cover image, as it had been planned from the beginning, but I honestly didn't think was going to work out. So another testament to making sure that you're giving your creative team the freedom to be creative. Ultimately, it is entirely rewarding. So the takeaways from this second video on faces and how to work with live models. The process begins with a plan. You need to thoroughly plan your photo shoot. From sketches to a shot list to hiring your team. You need a good photographer, a pro, There are a lot of different ways to find one, and do a little scoping around. If you're looking for someone and you don't want to go to a big expensive photo studio, go to a local craft show, or go to local. We have an artists guild in town here that has a store. Go look around there and find some business cards, talk to some people. You'll probably find a semi-pro who's willing to do the shoot for a fair amount of money and do a really good job. And the neat thing is that you'll also have an opportunity when you go to these places to see samples of their work and check them out without being, really overt about it. Treat your model with dignity, respect, and compliments. Again, this is a situation where they are putting their self-confidence and comfort zone on the line for you, for your book. So do that, and you'll get smiles like this out of it when you do that. And give your team creative freedom. Be flexible. Remember, you're hiring other artistic-minded people, especially your photographer, probably also your model, and let them exercise their ideas. In years past, when we were shooting film, it was always kind of invest the money on the film and the processing and the prints and yada 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 yada. These days, it's all digital, so just shoot, and you can sort through all the images on your computer later and not spend any extra money on all these chemicals and other processes involved that we used to have to do. But the biggest point too is, and just not to beat a dead horse here, but to reiterate again, be flexible. This is a kind of a fluid process, and you want to take advantage of that. So enjoy the process, and you'll end up with a raft of really good, useful material that you can use for your book and for all of your collateral material as well. So until the next time, I'm Bob Pierce from the studio.